Hello and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Thursday, July 27th, 2023. I'm Jer Stays, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about a transit system in Metro Detroit that is in crisis. Because of driver shortages, there are thousands of people who are being left stranded by buses that don't come, get cut. There's a lot of challenges here. So, to unpack it and what to do next, or proposals for what to do next, Megan Owens from Transportation Writers United. We're going to dive into that conversation after we pay a bill. Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Orange Sparkle Ball. Are you struggling to implement innovation and change within your organization? With a unique human-centered innovation approach, Orange Sparkle Ball, or OSB, helps organizations break through roadblocks and pain points to achieve measurable results. OSB is not your typical consultancy. OSB's agile approach to innovation allows you to move quickly to action and achieve measurable pilot results. To learn how you can drive innovation and success in your organization, contact OSB today at hello@osb.co. That's hello@osb.co. Joining me on the line, Megan Owens. She is the director of Transportation Writers United, and we're going to have a conversation I think is necessary around transit and buses and service in Detroit and Metro Detroit. Megan, I first want to say, though, welcome to Daily Detroit. I actually believe this is your first time with us.
I think it is, although I have been a first-time caller, long-time listener. Is that the line?
Yeah, I think it is. And I appreciate that. So over the last few years, especially before the pandemic, there has been a lot of progress with transit in Metro Detroit. And even recently with the recent countywide millage and support in Oakland County for SMART, there's been some real steps in recent years. But I have a report here that I think we need to talk about because we can have all of the positive looks forward, but we got to take care of some basics to make sure things happen. I think the first thing is let's outline what is the issue out there with transit and transportation and bus times since the pandemic?
Well, we've got a real crisis going on of the bus agencies, both SMART and DDOT, running less service than they had before the pandemic, not restoring that lost service, and still having a significant number of no-show buses. It's far too common for bus riders to be expecting a bus to come and it just doesn't show, or it's canceled shortly before. And that has really devastating impacts on people who are just trying to get around and live their everyday lives. There's a lot of reasons, but a big part of it is bus driver pay. When DDOT is hiring bus drivers at just $15 an hour and expecting them to have professional driving license, be able to handle not only traffic, but also the unique characteristics of the public on an everyday basis, we really need to have more competitive pay so that they can have enough drivers to run the service that people need.
So let's talk about that competitive pay. You know, some people might look and be like, well, $15 an hour, but I think it's important. Why don't we draw some context about how that pay sits versus, say, other transit agencies or other options that people have with the same kind of licensure and skill sets?
Not only do we compare to places like Chicago or Ann Arbor that have starting wages for their bus drivers of $28 an hour. So they're starting almost twice what DDOT is paying. But even just within the Detroit area, you can get a school bus driver job starting at $25 an hour, or truck driver jobs at $27 an hour. There's a lot of other options. Metro cars from the airport, $25 an hour. And so if someone has that commercial driver's license, they have choices. And we have to make sure that our bus agencies are providing a competitive wage that can draw people and get them to stay and to fill these critically important jobs. I mean, we certainly learned a lot during the pandemic about essential workers, and there's not much more essential than a bus driver that's enabling the rest of the community to get where they need to go.
Yeah, and we can talk about some of those numbers in a minute, but when I was looking through this report, it is labeled SOS Save Our Service. I look at this report and I see that Ann Arbor, who pays more, is actually able to not just provide the baseline of service, but they're actually able to provide over and above. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, they did recently pass a millage increase to expand service, especially into areas around Ypsilanti and such. But even if you have increased funding, if there's no driver for the bus, there's just no way to operate that bus. So yeah, Ann Arbor's now operating more service than they were before the pandemic hit. Well, unfortunately, Smart and DDOT are providing just 80 and 70% of what they had been providing before the pandemic. And I will say they are making efforts. They've reconfigured a lot of that service to be hitting the greatest demand, less of the downtown rush hour commute times and such. But even with that decreased amount of service, they're still not able to run every bus that they're committing. And we hear from riders and personally experience all the time buses that are supposed to be there just not showing up. For me, I have some flexibility. I can occasionally take a lift if I need. I can switch to the MOGO and get a little exercise. But a lot of riders have no choice. They can't afford, if they're working a minimum wage job, to spend $30 on an Uber. I literally overheard someone at a bus stop losing their job because the bus didn't show. They kept trying to apologize. Hey, I'm going to be there as soon as I can. But 45 minutes later, they're like, I heard at least from the other end of the line, they were told, don't bother coming in. So this is devastating impacts on people's lives when these buses don't show up. And this has gone on for way too long.
Well, and there are thousands and thousands of people who deal with this in the region, and it is compounded by the fact that the metro region is pretty sprawling. So a lot of these people, statistics show, many studies show that a lot of Detroit residents go to the suburbs for work, and there's just a lot that you have to negotiate with that, different bus lines, all that kind of stuff. So it is a real, very true challenge for a lot of people. But what can we do about this? Because I look at it and go, okay, well, there's been some better funding. Although I will note that Metro Detroit, although with all this increased funding in Oakland County, or I should say strengthened funding in Oakland County, because they didn't ask for a millage raise. They, it's reinforcing what they were doing. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges is that Metro Detroit still funds our buses at 1/3 of the level and our transit at 1/3 the level per capita that other metro regions do. And so, we're working to make a lot happen on a little, basically trying to make 30 cents of things happen on 10 cents. And so these challenges kind of compound. But what are you looking to do to try to address this? Because this has been a thing where I see the ads all the time for DDOT and Smart, like, hey, we're hiring more drivers, we're doing this thing. But so far, it doesn't seem to work. And those no-shows, no warnings really are something that wreak havoc on people trying to get to work.
They really do. And we have been working for many years. Ultimately, we need a major increase in investment in public transit. Not to say we're going to be trying to be a Seattle or Portland or New York City, but can we keep up with Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Minneapolis?
Or say a Columbus or something like that, because I've been traveling to other cities and seeing...
I know. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, the BRT, investment things where you've got cities that are much smaller than us and regions smaller than us. Of course, City of Columbus is bigger than Detroit, but the region's smaller than our region, yet they're able to put so much more money per person into things.
Yeah, your grandma was right when she told you there's no such thing as a free lunch. You have to invest in order to get good quality service. And in the longer term, we absolutely need to look at how we fund transit at the local, regional, state, federal levels. That's something that TRU's been very involved in for a long time. But most urgently for addressing this crisis, both Smart and DDOT are talking with their drivers' unions. They both have acknowledged that they need to make changes to their pay scales to be more competitive. But they've been talking about it for more than a year. The Smart drivers have been without a contract since January. So we really want to spotlight just how critical this is. This isn't something that you can just get around to eventually. People are having devastating impacts. So we're really calling on Mayor Duggan and on the county executives. Coulter and Evans and Hackel have all said a lot of really positive things about the importance of local bus service and how essential it is. We want them to get personally involved in resolving this crisis. They all oversee the agencies that run this service. If this is much of an important issue, as they say, they need to get involved in solving this crisis. We can't wait any longer to actually have competitive pay better working conditions so that we can run full service and start making the strides towards real rapid transit and some of the other expansions that have been long talked about. But as you said at the beginning, if you're not getting the basics right, if you can't run what you've got, we don't have much hope for making the bold expansions that we ultimately need.
For sure. I mean, there's plans I've seen on the drawing board, and they've talked about at DDOT about doing some sort of, light bus rapid transit system and things like that. But it takes drivers, it takes people to operate, it takes all the infrastructure behind it. What are some of the direct actions? You say that you want to get these leaders involved. What would you like them to do once they are involved?
A lot of it comes down to labor contracts. And while I know there's only so much that can be done from the outside, the mayor, he told me at a recent public meeting that he got personally involved when they were negotiating pay with the police union. He said he personally got in the room with the Detroit Police Union and wouldn't leave the room until they got a deal. And ultimately, police officers got a $10,000 raise. Time to do the same for DDOT bus drivers. And while the county executives don't personally run SMART, they do appoint the board members who run SMART. They can get more involved in resolving this, and they need to. If your listeners care about this stuff, we've got an action alert on our website, DetroitTransit.org, where each person can reach out themselves to share with the Big Four the importance of resolving this crisis so we can make the real improvements the region needs.
Do you think that in some of these cases it might require changes in funding? I think about the city of Detroit, and, there's a direct line there, city council, the mayor, and saying, okay, well, if we're going to pay these drivers a lot more, because it would be weird to me to see a union say, oh, we don't want more money. That'd be a very strange thing to me.
Oh, of course. They know these comparisons. They know they're underpaid. So it's a matter of working through something that will both provide them a more competitive wage and then also make the job a little bit more live-work friendly for some of these new drivers so they don't have crazy schedules that aren't reasonable to work around. So, yeah, it does come a lot down to the labor negotiations. And I will say, as you said, Oakland County passed a millage greatly expanding the service area, and so they have somewhat more funding coming in. Well, the city budget didn't increase funding for DDOT as much as we had urged them to. There was an increase. They did explicitly include an increase in the budget. We also were successful. We fought really hard over the last 6 months and got the state legislature to include an increase in the state's portion. The state used to cover half the cost of running local bus service. That's winnowed down over the last 30 years or so to providing barely 29%. But for the first time, we saw a real boost in state funding. There's never enough funding, but there is somewhat more funding available now. This is the right time for them to negotiate a deal because, again, you can't operate without drivers, and they've been trying to do that for 3 years. Each SMART and DDOT are short like 100 drivers out of the 400 or 500 they need. It's a massive number, and they're bringing on 5 or 10 at a time every couple of months, but that's not going to cut it.
Right, and then you also have attrition built in there too, retirements, all the other kind of stuff.
Yeah, some of it is, of course, retaining the existing drivers, making it so the existing drivers want to stay, not get their commercial driver's license and then skip off to go deliver for Amazon or something for a higher pay.
Right. And I think that's one of the challenges is that there is so much competition out there. And it just means it's a different world in some ways financially than before the pandemic. I'd also mention for listeners that different areas of the country and, sometimes people will say Canada, things like that, they have so much more transit. It's, in fact, in a lot of ways because it's funded. Like the formula mix is different than here, where we end up relying a lot on property taxes to make things go. And of course, there are some grants and matches and things like that. But I think most of our transit funding is local at this point.
Yeah, almost half of it is local. About 30% comes from the state. And we're working hard with state legislatures to increase. Again, the state used to cover half. If they could restore that, that would certainly help local agencies. There is more federal funding, a lot more commitment to transit and rail and such in this new federal administration. But most of that funding is only one-time projects. So it's great for buying new electric buses, or like they're building this new State Fair Transit Center, but you can't use the federal funds to run the buses. And the biggest cost of running transit are the drivers and the fuel to run day in, day out. So, yeah, funding continues to be a critical issue and one that we will continue to fight for. And there's certainly a lot more opportunities. There is a lot of interest in, are we going to see a new regional transit authority millage come forward in the next year or two or three? Will Wayne County take on the type of countywide service that Oakland County did? What other types of rapid transit expansion? I mean, hopefully we're going to see on Michigan Ave that dedicated transit/autonomous vehicle lane coming pretty soon. So we've got some exciting things that are possible. But yeah, you can't do them if you don't invest in the service. And as you've said before, even if you don't personally use it, transit is something that is so critical for our entire community. It might not be you, but it might be your kid's daycare worker, or the chef at your favorite restaurant, or the nurse at the hospital that you might need to go to. So we all depend on the people who depend on transit, which is why we all need this help to save our service.
Well, transit is one of the bones that makes a community strong. So I appreciate all that you've shared with me, all your information. Can you tell people, in case they want to get involved or they want to lend their voice to this, what can they do?
Absolutely. Well, go to DetroitTransit.org or follow us on any of the major social media channels at Detroit Transit. Yeah, Transportation Riders United has been working for 20 years now on what can we do to get more and better public transit and other affordable, sustainable mobility options throughout the greater Detroit region. And we have a monthly volunteer activism meetings, and we're doing a whole series of Transit Tuesday talks where people can come learn more about these issues. We have regular action alerts where with a few clicks you can send a message to your elected or appointed leaders. So please do get involved with TRU and help us in this fight for great transit.
A quick reminder, we are almost done with asks for nominations for the Podcast Awards. Under the News and Politics category, podcastawards.com. It is much appreciated. With that, I'm Jer Stace. Thank you to Cheyenne Nocerini for editing this interview. Thank you so much for listening. Devin O'Reilly joins me tomorrow. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.